Welcome to the Brave Feminine Leadership podcast, where we get to dig into delicious conversations with global leaders. We get to soak up their wisdom and perspective on life and all things leadership. And today I am so thrilled to introduce a wonderful, wonderful person, William Cowan, to the podcast. So, Will, when we met, I met you as Bill. So I know, let's give people both names. But Bill, it is so wonderful to have you here with me today. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, Melissa. It's great to be with you. And Bill is definitely the right way to go.
Perfect. Okay, so now we've got the formalities out of the way. Let me step into who you are for the audience that haven't met you before. So Bill has got over 30 years of experience in senior corporate leadership positions, including CEO, non-executive director and chair. And after graduating from Harvard as a Baker Scholar, he had joined McKinsey in London and spent time working for them there, New York and in Melbourne. Bill has provided personal career coaching to over 1,000 professionals across the globe, and he's been described as a master at helping people build their careers. We are extremely lucky because Bill has structured and formalised his coaching process, and it's set out in his book, Building a Winning Career, which is now a #1 bestseller on Amazon. And I just want to lay claim, Bill, I recommend this book to every single person I meet. And so I
like you more and more, Melissa.
I just want to say that I think I've had a hand in getting that towards #1 bestseller on Amazon. And I'm happy to keep going. Bill, I'm going to put you under the spotlight now. For anyone that hasn't met you, who are you as a human being?
Well, that is definitely a scary question, but let me give you a very short answer that may be relevant to this particular session. And so, I love helping people work out how to build a winning career. And I've been doing that now for 25 years. And the good news is, as you mentioned earlier, I've worked with over 1,000 people. Everyone is different. There's no cookie cutter approach, but there is a process that works, which thanks to COVID, I actually wrote up. And those of you who've read the book know that it's quite a long book. It's nearly 400 pages. So this is not a trivial process, but I love it because I'm working with very capable people and they're usually not at all well prepared for this process, particularly many of the people I work with are senior, but they've never had to look for a job in their whole life. So suddenly something's gone wrong. They've had an acquisition or a change of management or different priorities or budget problems, and suddenly they find themselves without a job. So if you ask those people what it is I do for them, it's definitely not writing a CV. Nearly everyone talks about how important your CV is, but it's really only 1% of the whole problem. And I like to think that I add, first of all, I'm a very good sounding board because I know I've met so many people, and most people don't know who to talk to in this process. Who do you trust? How forthright can you be? You don't really want to show weakness. So I think that's one of the things I bring to the party. Another thing I like to think is creative, that I can be creative in trying to work out where do you go. And in the book, I talk about aiming high. Too many people aim low. Why would you aim low and hit your target? I would like you to aim high and get somewhere close to your target. Go for the stars, hit the moon. Don't go for the next door neighbor and hit the pavement. And the third thing I can do, I think, is sharpen your thinking. Most people make themselves too complicated. They assume other people are interested in them. That's not true. The last thing anyone wants to do is read a long CV and try to interpret what it all means. So I'm one of the big points I make in the book is that it's all about being clear and concise. If you're clear and concise, you're already special. And I want to know what makes you special. I don't need to know every little piece about you that's happened over the last 20 years. That's not interesting to me. I want to know what makes you stand out. And you might remember from the book, I talked about a senior lawyer who, when we actually went out and asked people about what made her special, It was that she was fun to work with. It was not that she was a great lawyer. And this was a revelation for me and for her, by the way, that she was fun to work with. And that's actually what we talked about going forward. And she got a job because of that, not because she was a great lawyer. We knew she was good at law. We didn't need to sort of hammer away at that. We need to find something that made her special.
That's really, sorry, Bill, I was going to say that's such a fascinating point, because often what makes you special, you have no idea about.
Well, she didn't know. She didn't know that she just assumed that's what people did, and that everyone was fun. The weird thing was they said, you're the only lawyer we know who's fun to work with. So that was quite a revelation as well. But the people don't validate what they're thinking or what they want to test. They make it up. They go along. You ask them what makes them special. They come up with a laundry list of stuff. It's probably not right. You need to talk. You need to get feedback from other people who've worked with you and seen you at your best. By the way, I'm not interested in a random sample. I'm interested in people who've seen you at your best, because I want you to be working at your best. Okay, when you're working at your best, what do you do well and what makes you special? It's a funny thing, but not many people ask that question.
No. So you said something recently, and I was super lucky to be able to invite you to join a cohort of senior female leaders that I was working with. And you made a comment that I think was so important for people to hear. And that is that quite often people, when they're in the situation of having to find a new role, can be really hard work, and they end up, getting down and thinking that there's something wrong with them. And I just think the words you shared then, I think were so important. So I'm just going to take you there again. Like, what do you see when you see people going through these processes?
Well, I think there's 380 pages on this topic, but there's three things that I think are really important. One is that people don't realize they've got to prepare properly. And many people I see are used to being high activity, high production people. They want to get out. I think I should start calling recruiters tomorrow. I say no. You shouldn't meet anyone for at least a month. You have to be at your best when you meet people, not desperate or unclear about what makes you special. So they try to move too fast. They don't prepare well enough. When I work with people, I take generally a month to get ready. So that most people would say that's bizarre. Why can't I start calling recruiters tomorrow? I say the last people you should call is recruiters, because as soon as you meet a recruiter and you say, I've lost my job and I'm trying to figure out whether there's anything out there, they'll know you're not prepared. And any good recruiter will tell you, you need to prepare. You're not ready for me. The second thing is they expect results too quickly. This is a bit like farming. You've got to find good soil. You've got to plant the seed. The seed's got to germinate. The seed's got to grow. Some seeds thrive, others die. So you've got to be patient. And in fact, it was very interesting in your session the other day that someone was very relieved to hear that it takes 6 months to find a job. They were assuming that something was wrong with them because they were looking for 2 months, hadn't found a job yet. I would say if you get a job within 6 months, the danger is you're moving too fast. You may not be getting the best job for you. So I'm saying take your time, try. Ideally, I'd love you to have 3 job offers or 3 jobs in process, so you can compare and contrast. The danger is that the people jump too soon. So that's another thing that I think is a difficulty for them. The other thing is they blame themselves when things go wrong. So they don't understand that this is not a scientific process. It's not even a good art. It is really very, very difficult for most people because they're not in control of it. They're dependent on other people. They're at other people's whim, and other people have got other things on their mind. That you're not the most important thing that they're thinking about. You're number 20, and so that they don't return calls. They give you naive advice. They think they're being helpful, but they're really not. And so then you start to worry there's something wrong with me. I'm too old, I'm too tall, I'm too short, I'm, whatever it is. You start to see all your own defects. I can tell you, this is not you, it's the process. It's very difficult and challenging. And most people haven't been through it before. So naturally, I think they sort of assume, well, there's something wrong with me. I can tell them, there's nothing wrong with you. It's a numbers game. That's why I say you've got to meet 50 new people. It sounds outrageous. How could you meet 50 new people? And by the way, it's very hard to do if you've got a job. You've got to take it easily. You meet one a month or something like that. But if you don't have a job, if you're in transition, I'd like you to meet 5 people a week. So in 10 weeks, you can meet 50 people. But you've got to do it in the right way. It's no good just meeting 50 people and having a chat. You've got to have working sessions. You need to test your thinking with them. You need to have hypotheses. So how do you generate the right hypotheses, and how do you make them clear and simple? Many people don't get help because they ask for a job. You should never ask for a job. People freeze up. They ask for advice. Ask for advice, you'll get a job. Ask for a job, you'll get advice.
So, it's you and I had this conversation, and it's probably worth clarifying that when you're talking about it can take someone 6 months to get a role, I think we're talking about people at a certain level of their career. So, and I'll ask you about that. Like, do you think there's a level we're talking about? But when I think about our audience broadly who are listening to this podcast, incredible female leaders, most of them have had very big careers or in the middle of big careers. And to a large degree for most of them, and I suspect this is the case with most people you work with, as highly talented people, their careers have been pretty easy. They've been seen by people, spotted by people, picked up. I want you on my team. I want you to do all these different things. And it's really easy until it isn't.
Yes.
And it's that point where, people are completely lost. And if I can just take 1 minute briefly to think when you and I met when I had made the decision post-illness to step away from a CEO role. So had that big career. I'd been used to selling a company. I hadn't been used to selling me. And you and I met because I was part of a program about considering board roles into the future. And I'm just going to pause there for a minute and just say, what is that a genuine reflection? Are most people you meet in that situation themselves?
Yeah, well, I'm very lucky that I do meet really good people, but you're right in a way that the further you go up the pyramid, there's fewer and fewer roles, and it's more competitive. You're competing with better and better people. I think there's 4 big problems that people face. One is, where do they begin? They've suddenly lost their job or something's happened to them, and where do they actually start? They're in the middle of a dark forest. They don't even know which way to start walking. 2 is, if they get into a process, how do they maximize their chance of success? Even if you're in the final 5, in the so-called short left, you've only got a 20% chance of success if you're just like the others. And so how do you differentiate yourself? How do you make yourself special? And I think you do it by asking questions, not by telling people how good you are. I think you sell yourself by asking good questions. The third thing is, if I'm offered the job, is it really the right job for me and my family? And I say there's 5 things you've got to think about. One is your values. Are they consistent with the enterprise and with your future boss? 2 is, can you make a big difference? I don't want you to be in a job where you're treading water or shuffling paper. The problem is not so much you, it's will they let you do that? Do they have the budget? Do they have the systems? Do they have the priorities to let you make a difference? The third thing is, where does it lead? Because I'm not only interested in your next job, I'm interested in where's it go. If you're 45 or 50, you've got another 20 years of contribution to make if you don't want to sit down and in a rocking chair and drink tea, which people I work with don't want to do.
No.
I'm not going to let them, actually.
Even if they want to, Bill says no.
No, I'm sorry, this is not the right answer for you. So is it, where does it lead? Is it the right answer for you and your family? And families will find all sorts of ways these days, but you're not put on earth to die in the office and lose your family. That's my theory. And then finally, will they pay you enough? Because I don't see why you should go backwards. And if someone's thinks you're valuable at a certain level, then why can't we find someone else who thinks you're valuable? But it is a value problem, not a cost problem. And one thing that upsets me is when a business or a recruiter says, "What's the lowest salary you'd accept?" I say you can't answer that. That's not an appropriate question. They need to offer you a salary, and then you can say, well, that's high enough or it's not high enough. But you can't bid against yourself. You're not in an auction against yourself. And yet people get asked that question. So,
how do you think people should answer that question? But I mean, you've said no, don't answer that question. But if that question comes out legitimately, what do you guide people to say?
well, I say, you know what my highest salary's been, because I've told you that. Most recruiters will ask you, almost the first question they ask you is, what salary are you on, or do you think is appropriate for you? So they should know roughly what you're on. The big problem is if the last job is not really the salary level that you should have had.
Yes.
So then I say, well, the highest salary I've ever taken home is X. Then when they come back to say, what's the lowest you'd accept? I say, well, I'm sorry, but that's not the right question for me. You should offer me a role and tell me what you're willing to pay, and I will tell you whether I'm willing to accept that or not. And by the way, I don't think you should accept it necessarily. I think everything is negotiable. And if you're hiring a senior person, you should expect them to be a good negotiator. So why would you be upset if they try to negotiate the arrangements?
Yeah, I've said that many, many times to people. You know, I'm excited if someone tries to negotiate their salary, to be quite frank with you. So what matters most in these processes? Is it people's performance, their image or their visibility in the marketplace? Because I know, working with a lot of senior females, I often come across the fact that if I work hard and keep my head down, then I'll get the opportunities that I deserve.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's not right. There is this model that I use, which was designed by someone in the US, but called PIE, Performance Image Exposure. And he came to the conclusion, working in a big corporate, that performance you've got to be a high performer. You can't expect, there are exceptions. You sometimes wonder what's going on. But generally, you've got to be a high performer. But that's only, he argues, it's only 10% of your likely reason for success. He says the way you present yourself is 30%. That's your image, your brand, what people think you stand for, and so on, and your performance in terms of delivering what you promise, that sort of thing. And I say it's something to do with how you treat stress. People who freak out or become anxious or angry under stress, that transmits to other people. That's a very difficult situation. So I say we've got to understand how you handle stress. But the most important, he says, is exposure. You need to be people who make the decisions about who to promote and who not to promote. And that's inside and outside. People who make decisions about who to hire, you need to be visible to them. You need to be highly visible. He says that's 60% of the equation.
Okay.
That's really why I say you've got to meet 50 people. You need to increase the exposure you've got to different people. Most people who've been successful in business, they've got their sort of their network of people they've been dealing with, but they haven't necessarily got a very diverse network of people who know things that they don't know. You don't know what you don't know until you get out there and start to see what other people think of you and where you might fit, and you'll be amazed. I think you'll simply be amazed at how people come up with different ideas about you. So The problem is universities don't teach you. They teach you performance. They do not teach you about your brand or indeed how to get visibility. And I once worked with a young man from Northern Ireland who was in Australia, and he'd been taught to keep his head down. Do not expose yourself, because in Northern Ireland, you're likely to be killed.
Yeah.
So he went into a big corporate in Melbourne, and after a year, they said, really, we don't know what you do. And he was very bright, and he was extremely lucky. He came to me, and we worked out his problem was not his performance. It was he didn't know the right people in the organization. In the end, we got him to meet the chief information officer, who was sort of 3 or 4 levels above him. And we also got him to meet the CEO.
Yes.
And his whole career changed when that happened. People above him knew about him. So that's a problem. It's a problem that people don't understand, that you need exposure internally and externally. You can be a super high performer, but if you're a backroom person, it's unlikely you're going to progress above and beyond being a super high performance in your little technical area.
It's interesting that you tell that story, because, you know, I think Australia and the tall poppy syndrome contributes a fair bit to that as well. So it's interesting to hear someone from Ireland coming over here and not being visible at all. I see that problem here with a lot of people. Why would they want to talk to me? You know, when it comes to suggesting go and meet the CEO or go and speak to this person, do you see that as well?
Well, yes, it is a problem for us. We'd prefer to talk about what football team do you support, rather than what makes you special. We don't feel at all comfortable about that. And most people are not very good at answering the question anyhow. So it's, in one way, it's not a very productive area to talk about. But it is, see, people don't realize we're in the marketing business when we're looking for a role. Recruiters are in the risk management business. They're trying to find 5 good people who meet the requirement and let the client decide who's the best for them, who fits best. And but we want to be the person who's selected. Now, most people, rightly, I think, don't really want to go around sort of thumping their chest and telling people how good they are. That's why good questions are very important, because it shows you're smart. It shows that you've thought about the problem. It shows that you've done your homework on the business. See, if you're in an interview, I like you to start with a question, not wait until the end. I heard about a situation. Fortunately, the person wasn't working with me. Otherwise, I would have been very upset. But they went into an interview and they got the impression from the position description that the job was all about strategic thinking. So they hammered away for 50 minutes on what a great strategist they were. And then they asked the question, what kind of person are you looking for? And they said, we're looking for an operating.
Oh, no.
We're looking for someone who's good at managing operations. So they obviously didn't go any further, and they'd wasted the whole hour. And if they'd only asked the question at the beginning, you know, where are you trying to take the business? How are you going to get there? What do you want me to do to contribute to the success of the business and to your success, by the way? Then they would have been much better equipped to sort of talk about the topic at hand and to tell stories, because you make progress by telling stories, not by telling people that, and by the way, stories should be all about your impact, not about what you've done. I personally am not interested. I'm not particularly interested in, I've managed a process where, you know, we ended up with a new computer platform or something. I want to know what the platform did. You know, because of my work, we changed the success of the business. We introduced a new platform, new computer platform, and we did it on budget, on time. But you look at a lot of CVs, they'll talk about what the process they managed is. You know, I was in charge of marketing. We sort of introduced some new products. They don't say what the impact is. I'm interested in impact. And I'm interested in 4 things, really. One is, are you a leader? And that is, everyone's a leader. It doesn't matter what level you are. I want you to be seen to be a leader. 2 is, do you make a difference? I'm not interested in people who just tread water. 3 is, do you have energy? You can't bore someone into hiring you.
Are you sure? Why not?
That's my theory. If you can bore them into hiring you, you probably shouldn't be in that job or in that business. And finally, are you commercial? Do you think commercially? Can you add value? And incorporating all of these are your people skills, of course. We want you to have EQ as well as IQ, and we want you to be able to tell stories about how you've developed people and how they've had an impact.
The value thing's really interesting, because even after we had the session the other day, one of the things you shared is make sure that your CV is punchy with numbers in it. And you were alluding to the value side of things. And for some people, they step away from that and they're like, well, I've never led a P&L. I've never, led the sales team. I don't have numbers. And so we talked about it afterwards. It's what drives value for a business: keeping customers, growing customers, keeping people. There's a stack of numbers. It doesn't just have to be the financial numbers.
Well, that's great. That's right. We're not necessarily, not everyone I work with wants to be a CEO.
No.
But we do want them to be effective. So how can you tell whether you're effective or not? It could be that you've changed the culture of the organization. It could be that you've improved the net promoter score of the customers. If you're in HR, it could be that you've developed a whole new management team, that you've somehow got people more committed and motivated and giving more discretionary effort. You may not be able to say, I've grown the business by 20%, but you sure as eggs can find some number. I'm not sure if I mentioned it the other day, but I was talking to a recruiter the other day who said, if there's not a number on the front page of your CV, I will not look at it. So he just puts it in the bin straight away. And the scary thing about recruiters is when they're sorting through CVs, they only look at them for 6 seconds. So if you've got a 10-page CV, you're actually muddying the waters. You need something really punchy. What makes me special? That's why I like to use a headline as to what it is that makes you special. And I want you to be a leader who makes a difference, who's got energy and who's got commercial skills. That's what I want you to be.
So you've probably answered this anyway, but I find a lot of people, they dig into this process and they spend hours finessing their CV. So it's like, I've got 10 hours here. I'm going to spend 9.5 finessing my CV. And if I've got a spare 30 minutes, I might consider reaching out to someone to make a new connection. People hate networking. So how do we break this down for people and help them get over that fear?
Well, the first thing is about CVs. Now, we do want a good CV, but really, if you talk to recruiters, what they're mainly interested in is what jobs have you had and how much responsibility have you had. They keep asking you, how many people have you managed? So I've got one person at the moment he's been in a big company and managed quite a lot of people, and then he started his own business and he built it up to 20 people. Now, recruiters are saying, oh, well, you don't really know how to manage people. The problem is we've got to reorientate them back to the previous big business and say, well, in that job, I had 250 people reporting to me, and I made a huge difference to the business. The problem is recruiters, well, in a way, I'm not surprised, but they sort of pick something about you and they worry, is this a defect or not? Yes. I had one person I worked with who'd had 5 jobs in 10 years. Now, unfortunately, he didn't, before he came to me, he was talking about all these 5 jobs. Recruiter's impression was, you can't hold a job. Why are you moving so fast? He should have positioned himself as, I am a change agent. When I've introduced the change, I move on because I do not want to run a day-to-day, ordinary, routine business. because he didn't do that, he actually became very depressed because every recruiter basically said, well, it's hard to see how you're going to get a job. You can't hold a job for more than 2 years. If we'd just positioned him as a change agent, it would have made a huge difference to him, I think, because a lot of people want change agents.
Absolutely. Everyone needs that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
networking.
Yeah. So this is a huge topic. And I think I've got at least 100 pages in the book about this.
You
do. The problem is most people give up. They don't do it. They don't prepare properly, and then it doesn't work, and then they give up. They don't know how to network. It's a term that people assume it means meet people. Networking, the way I do it, is not about just meeting people. It is trying to test your thinking all the time. And the people who've read my book will know that I think about three different, you're in the bullseye, and there are three circles around you, which I call the A list, the B list, and the C list. And the A list are people you already know. And I'd like there to be sort of 10 to 15 to 20 people in that list. And they want to help you, but they don't know how to help you generally. And what we got to do is prepare properly and then go to them and say, here's how I'm describing myself. Does this make sense to you? And here's what I'm trying to explore. You can't just say, I don't know what I want to do and, got any ideas. They won't. They'll have, I can tell you, most people have zero ideas about where you could go next. But if you say, I think I should be running a business unit in a major corporate with, 1,000 people, and it should be in this kind of sector or that sector or that sector. It could be infrastructure, it could be manufacturing, it could be something else. Then, and these are the kind of companies or organizations I think that I would like to understand more about, then people can help you. Oh, I didn't know you were interested in Google. I know someone in Google. The whole name of the game is building warm connections. I talk in the book about this idea that you've got to generate votes. Most people think you have a meeting and that's the end of it. I'm saying that's not good. That's a waste of time. You need to have a relationship, not a meeting. Because you are selling a intangible product. You're selling the promise of a future benefit. You're not buying a can of soft drink. You're buying Melissa, who is somehow in the future going to make your business more successful and you more successful, hopefully, as well. So how do you get votes? Well, you build warm connections. How do you build warm connections? Well, you do it by having warm introductions. Cold calling is not a good idea. I did have someone who thought they would do that, and they had a routine of calling 5 people every day. They'd read the Financial Review and call 5 people every day that were mentioned in the Financial Review. It led to sort of really them being very depressed because it didn't lead anywhere at all. Yeah. But if then they started being introduced by people who knew them and trusted them and believed in them. That's the people will meet you not because of you. They couldn't care less about you. They meet because Melissa has introduced me to them. And I trust Melissa, therefore I'm going to trust them. And then when I meet them, I suddenly become really interested in them because they're well prepared. They're testing something. I'm trying to understand more about this industry, or I'd like to meet someone who's a thought leader in this sector. I'm looking for a role model who has gone through the same kind of career steps that I've gone through and has gone on to do some other bigger things. I'd love to meet someone like that who could perhaps help me really understand what the next steps are. Because I think it's all very well to have a coach, but you really need a mentor. And actually, the best of all is to have a sponsor. If you look at people who have ended up on big boards, for argument's sake, they nearly always had a sponsor. It's not done through they say it's done through a recruiting process, but there's someone in the background who is saying, this Melissa is outstanding. you should meet her. They're not saying hire her or put her on a board. They're saying you should meet her. You'll be impressed with her. That's what we're trying to do. Now, networking, the weird thing is the jobs don't come from people you know, generally. They need to introduce you to someone else who I call the B list. And the jobs don't come from the B list either. This is quite extraordinary. But
like a celebrity red carpet here. It's not the A list or the B list.
No, it's the C list. Now, why? Because the C list don't care about the 56 things that are asked for in the position description. They're looking for 2 or 3 big things. I worked with a senior woman recently, and she got a big job, and she asked them, "Why did you hire me?" And they said, "Well, there were 3 things. One is we can see you're a very creative commercial person. 2 is we really like your attitude, and you seem to be someone who's got a growth mindset, who won't be daunted by anything. And 3, we saw the feedback you received from people who had seen you at your best, and we were really impressed with that feedback." So there were 3 things that swung it for her, not 56 things which you see in some position descriptions. I had another man who we couldn't actually understand what the job was. It was incomprehensible from the position description. So in the end, he did get to meet the CEO, and the CEO could describe it in 10 seconds. The CEO said, we have bought a business. We need to merge it in with the parent company. That's the job.
I can do that.
What a breakthrough. We now understand what the job is. I can do that. I've done that 3 times before. Yeah. There was a totally different conversation are you an ethical person? Do you come to work on time? All these questions that are in the position description, which are, do you walk on water? No, actually I don't, but I can merge an acquisition in with the parent company. That's what I can do. So that's the networking is, and it's a soul destroying process at one level, because it's a lot of people you meet don't actually know how to help you, or say they can't. But you only need to kiss one frog that turns into a prince, and it's changing your life. So unfortunately, this is a numbers game, and you can't give in. And it's very odd. I've just got a call last night from someone who accepted a job, and we weren't particularly thrilled with it. We thought, it's good, but it's not really what I wanted to aim high. Would you believe that someone he met 6 months ago has just called him and said, "I think I've got a really big job for you."
Wow.
Because the person, I didn't know it at the time, but they're now retiring, and they've opened up this slot. So my guy had made a big impact with them, but there wasn't the opportunity for him at the time. Now the opportunity has emerged. So are you prepared when the opportunity is presented? That's the question. And the problem is the opportunity, we don't know when the opportunity will be presented. So networking, the reason most people, they give up on networking is they don't know how to do it. So, and they assume somehow it's going to lead to quick results. It doesn't. But think of the fact that you're building a network for life, not for the next job or to solve your problem. I tell the story in the book about a recruiter who said of 10 people he's seen recently who'd been introduced to him by friends, not one of them, only 3 of them had thanked him. 7 had not even thanked him. Now, isn't that interesting? How do you build a relationship if you don't even thank the person for meeting them, for taking the trouble to meet you? I've gotten the theory that the people thought he should be thanking them for presenting themselves. They didn't have a clue. They didn't really know what they were doing. Then he said the 3 that did thank him didn't stay in touch. Now, the chances of him having a job for anyone who turns up just off the street to meet him is almost 0. But there's not a 0 chance that he'll have the right job for them in 2 or 3 years' time. So they should have been staying in touch some way. They don't need to go out to dinner with him each month, but they do need to just let him know. They didn't even tell him when they got a job. You would think that the least you would do is thanks for the meeting, really appreciate you helped me. By the way, I finished the book by saying, say thank you. Even to the people who didn't help you, say thank
I
you.
love that. I love that section.
They will remember the fact that you said thank you. A lot of people don't.
So some humbling words there as I pick out a couple of the key things around, some of these introductions you'll get couldn't care less about you. It's all to do about the person recommending you. So that's good. You're going to have to kiss some frogs along the way. And it is a numbers game. I really do love, and I want to move there because what I love about your book is it's so complete in terms of giving people guidance on success in the new role. And, there's a couple of things there that one thing you talk about is building relationships. And I see so many people get straight into a role, head down, go hard, and they haven't built the peer relationships, they haven't taken the time. The other thing about people feeling pressured to go straight into a role between roles and not take any time off. Tell me about I'm going to stay with networking for a minute because the other thing you make a point of, and I think it's so true, is people stop networking once they're in a role.
Yeah.
And yet what you've just spoken about goes to underline that if you don't build that network, it's not going to be there when you do need it. How do people make it a priority still, Bill? How do you help people make that a priority still?
Well, I think you've got to give it quite a lot of thought, and you've got to make it a discipline. I suggest, I know when you get a job, you're flat out. It's very difficult. There are certain ways you can maintain a network or grow it. In your case, chief executive women, people like that. You need to keep building your network because you never know when someone will help you. I say also, if you're in a job, you can't go out and meet people every week, meet new people, but you can bring people into your office and have a sandwich lunch and talk about a topic of interest. I was just talking to a woman today in Houston, oddly enough, and she is an expert on AI. Now, it's you could bring people in and talk about AI in your industry and get other people's ideas. It doesn't have to be a big topic. Well, AI is a big topic, but it can be quite a small topic. How do you motivate people? I'm in an industry where we're under a lot of cost pressure. How do you handle this problem? So I'd be trying to think of ways of joining groups where you can learn and where it is a networking opportunity, or bringing groups to you. And if you've met 50 new people, there should be a way of getting half a dozen of them together once a month to just talk about some topic of mutual interest. Maybe you bring in someone who's an expert. Maybe you were at business school and you have a relationship with a professor or something like that. You bring them in to have a discussion. It's you'll find, and one young man I worked with, I was trying to help him understand that he needed to increase his network. I said, why don't you just get the people who are in your final year at university with you, ask them for drinks at a pub and talk about what you want to do? Because he was in a third tier accounting firm and he wanted to try to get into a first tier accounting firm. Now, you wouldn't believe this, but as a result of that little get together, he got 3 job offers from first tier accounting firms.
Wow.
Just telling people that he was trying to think of new ways of moving his career forward triggered all these opportunities. No, he hadn't talked to anyone before. So I say, you've got to talk. Hopefully you don't lose these relationships you've built during your networking. You've got to find a way of maintaining them. And a lot of people don't do it. They're sort of too busy. Another way of doing it when you come in, I mentioned in the book, when you come in, it's very important in a new job to work out how do you build connections with people. I had a chief financial officer who went into a big company, and we worked out everyone was going to assume he was going to try to work out how to improve the company and what needed to be fixed. So we consciously said, well, the first meeting with each of his direct reports will be about their family. Shock, horror, you know.
But you're going to ask about people's family.
Yeah, no one's ever asked me about my family before.
Yeah.
So it had a huge impact. And then the second thing we did was we got the chief executive to agree that the chief financial officer should meet each board member and ask them what they wanted to improve in the board papers. At the next board meeting, he came in with all the improvements. So the board never forgot that. He could have spent the whole time, you know, reviewing numbers and checking, what's going on in the business and turning the screws, and we need to tighten up things and so on. But we didn't. We talked about relationships to begin with, and it, in his case at least, it turned out to be very valuable. He became chief executive, by the way.
Oh, wow.
4 years later. And
Fantastic.
it started on the first week when he saw the board.
Bill, the last thing in your book, and I just think I'll call it out, it's from Professor Ram Charan, where you talk about advice for people to make a decision about whether they should leave a role or not. It almost comes full circle when you get back to the end of the book. And, you know, I hear from a lot of leaders who are feeling stuck in their career, and I think it's because of one of these categories. You know, the 3 things he asked people to assess. Would you talk about what they are briefly?
Yes. He talks about, is the company thriving or not? And he talks about a lot of companies are, they look on the surface as though they're doing well, but in fact, you know, the top management is sort of really doesn't know what to do. They're cutting costs. They don't really know where to take it. And so he says, first thing, it's better to be in a company that's thriving rather than one that's struggling. And oddly enough, this person I was talking to in Texas today was saying that this is an issue for them, that they're under a lot of financial pressure at the moment. So it's not unusual. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
But Ram Charan was saying, really, if you want to thrive, it's better to be in a growth environment. And in the book, I talk about, do you want to be a whale or a tiger shark? You know, I'd prefer you to be a tiger shark rather than a whale being attacked by tiger sharks. So that's the first big problem. The second one that he talks about is your boss helping you to develop? Are you learning on the job? Are you making progress? Because if you're not, if you're just stable or static or going backwards or bored, it's not a good place to be.
Yeah.
He would argue that that's another bad sign that you're not developing. And then a third thing, I think, I'm trying to do this from memory, but I think the third thing is, are you contributing?
And growing yourself and contributing.
Yes, and growing. Yeah. And if not, then that's not a good place for you to be if you're a high performer. He feels you shouldn't be treading water. You should be it's my point about, can you make a difference? And you might have the potential to make a difference, but you cannot make a difference because of the budget, because the board is very risk averse. The board has got to be in their bonnet about something. They don't really understand. This is a problem with boards. They don't necessarily know enough about the business to understand what the real key success factors are. So it's about growth, really. He's saying you should be in a growth environment, and so am I. I'm saying that. And you know, most new jobs these days, they give you're on probation for 6 months. What they haven't really figured out is they're on probation for 6 months as well.
Yes.
You can leave at more or less at the drop of a hat if you get a better offer or things happen. You've got no commitment to it. They have not committed to you. Unfortunately, the lawyers have written all these agreements now, so they're protecting the business, but in a way, they're also making them more vulnerable that someone good comes in, because you can't really tell what the job's like until you get into it. and you start to see who you're working for, what's important. Are they investing in you or not? Do they think your development's important or not? You know, I personally believe they should. I think who was it? I think it was someone who said, we don't hire people, Steve Jobs. We don't hire smart people to tell them what to do. We hire smart people to tell us what to do.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Bill, we are so incredibly lucky that you've taken your double degree of engineering and commerce initially, and you've taken your engineer's mindset to laying this process out. Your passion in this space just absolutely shine through. And I know firsthand, you know, having seen you help people build careers, just how successful you are at it as well. Can I ask you the final question I ask everybody, which is, from your perspective, given the name of our podcast, what does brave feminine leadership mean to you? And do you think it needs to change?
Well, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because actually, I treat everyone the same. I don't mind whether you're a woman or a man or something else, really. But it's the requirements for success are pretty much the same. I admit there is this problem, or I'm aware of this problem, that at one level, I think you've talked about Tara Moore, the coach in the US, who says that she's never worked with a senior woman who doesn't say they wish they were more confident. Mm. Now, I think if you ask senior men, you'd probably find a very similar thing, actually. A lot of people worry that they're not up to the job, or that they'll be found out. But it is, there is a need to be courageous in a leadership role. Good leaders tend to be courageous. They're not sort of paper pushers. So the first word, I would say, all right, that makes sense. We want people to think more about being courageous. And if they're not thinking about that, then they should. How do I take some risks? You know, the first thing I say is you should be aiming high. Mm. So how do I do that? And by the way, I can be vulnerable. You know, in fact, people want to help people who are courageous and vulnerable. So that's all right. Ask for help. One of the things I say in your new job is ask for help. Don't pretend you've got all the answers. It's probably a bad strategy. I do mention in the book that in the Harvard Business Review, they say that 40% of chief executives fail within the first 18 months. Mm. So how can that be when they go through such a rigorous process that to be selected? Well, they say it's for two reasons. One is they find they can't make as much change. There's much more pushback in the organization than they expect, but also the board is very naive about how quickly things can be changed. So then they become disillusioned, and you know, you haven't met their requirements. So the courageous, I like. Feminine, well, I think it is good to, if you write a book, they tell you you've got to focus on a person, not a class of person, but a person. So if I'm writing a book, in some ways I could focus on you, Melissa, my target market, you know. So my target market is sort of mid to senior professionals who are probably looking for a role, more than just coaching. I like the idea that I can help you build a winning career, not just help you do a better job. So my target market is a subset of senior professionals. They're the ones who are looking for a role. So, you know, I'd say, I'd be interested in what you think about the name.
I talk about it all the time. I talk about it all the time, but actually, given that you've asked, one of the things is when I use the term feminine in it, you can talk target market, and yes, I work largely with senior female leaders, not exclusively, but largely with senior female leaders. But the feminine aspect of it really talks to the fact that I think we have grown up and become accustomed to a certain archetype around leadership. And I think there's a lot of benefits for all of us in flexing our leadership style and bringing in things that maybe traditionally have been considered more feminine, like empathy and listening and things like that. And I think that there's room for all of us. You know, I think it's leadership that's accessible for all of us. And it's simply saying that we don't have to operate with one model that we've seen. And I say that, Bill, because I see a lot of senior female leaders who look up and they see some old style leadership, and it doesn't create an environment in which they want to aspire to more senior roles. And for me, I want people to aspire to those senior roles because I know how rewarding they are. And so that's...
No, that's a good point. I worked with one senior woman who wanted to move to a portfolio career, to be a director. And my advice to her was, you better be careful about the first board that you accept, because that defines you at some level. That's your brand. So if you pick a third-rate company board just because someone tells you it's a good learning experience, I say no. A, it's not likely to be a good learning experience, but two, B, it could be risky, but three, your brand is going to be affected by this. You will be seen to be a director of third-rate companies. Yeah. So she went through, it took her 18 months to find her first board, which turned out to be a global business, by the way, the Australian arm of a global business. But in the process, there were a bunch of chairs who interviewed her who freaked out because she was too strong, too strategic. They wanted someone who was a wallflower, who sort of filled the numbers. Yeah. So I was saying, well, you do not want to go to a board like that. That is not going to be a good decision for you. Yeah. There was a number of other boards where she could have made a huge contribution, but they were not good enough for her, and they were too risky for her. And they would have branded her as being kind of a second or third tier director. Oddly enough, I've got a friend who's in the recruiting business who asks the question when people come in and say, I want to be a director. He asks, what quartile director do you want to be? Because and this is a terrible question to be asked, by the way, because if you say fourth quartile, that's not a very good answer. But first quartile, then he says, well, okay, so here's X, Y, and Z, they're first quartile directors. Do you think you're like them? And it's quite obvious you're not. So it's horses for courses, but you do need to learn, but you better learn from someone good. And my own view is, the people I'm talking with, I want you to be a chair of a board at some point. So I'd like you to join a board where the chair invests enough in you to develop you as the chair of the board. And that's a very interesting problem. You know, which boards do that, and where can I get traction to begin with? And so you've got to reject as well as accept. You know, that's part of so that's what a courageous person, feminine leader does. You know,
I love that. I love that. Beautiful examples. So to me, it seems that everyone needs a Bill or William Cowan by their side. But Bill, thank you so much for joining our conversation today. I'm so thrilled to have had you join us.
Pleasure. Well, you can see I am interested in this topic, and partly because I meet fantastic people who go on to do great things. So it's a good part. It's helping people is a good thing to do, and I love doing that. And that's why I wrote the book as well, because I felt I can only deal with a certain number of people face to face, but I can get the message out to a much wider audience. And just to give myself a plug, the audio book is coming out in a few weeks. So the people who can't be bothered to read can, I hope, listen. Okay.
We will make it easy for them to find that. But thank you again, Bill. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Melissa. Great, very good to be able to talk about this. Thank you.